Welcome to a story that chilled a nation. Philadelphia, July 1st, 1874. A summer morning alive with the scent of fresh grass and the hum of carriages rolling over cobblestone streets. Children playing under the sun, unaware that within moments, one of them would vanish. Singular disappearance. Fate unknown. The boy was Charlie Ross, 4 years old. A child plucked from his front lawn. Two men, William Mosher and Joseph Douglas, lured him with promises of fireworks. Eyewitnesses later recalled the cheerful chatter of Charlie turning into silence, the kind of silence that whispers across history. Documents preserved in police archives tell of letters 23 in total sent to Christian Ross riddled with misspellings. Demands of $20,000. A fortune then, the boy's father desperate, negotiating, heart-pounding. No exchange ever succeeded. The boy never returned. Newspapers across the nation ran the story. The Philadelphia Inquirer described the affair as an unprecedented and horrifying abduction. And yet beyond the inked pages, beyond the official records, folklore began to grow. Whispers of ghostly sightings near the Ross estate, shadows in the mist, unseen figures following the boy, the story entering the collective imagination, a tale at the boundary of reality and myth. And it begins not with the abduction itself, but with the chase on a cold December night. Holmes Van Brunt and his companions confronted Joseph Douglas in Brooklyn. A shootout ensued. Mosher was killed instantly. Douglas mortally wounded, in his final breaths. Confession emerged. He and Mosher had been behind Charlie's disappearance. The boy never returned. Yet his name would echo, through decades, inspiring law enforcement reforms, increasing public awareness of kidnapping, and setting a grim precedent for the crimes that would follow. Philadelphia, summer of 1874. The city alive with the heat of July, the hum of commerce and the quiet tension that hung in the alleys where shadows clung like cobwebs. On the morning of the first day of July, Christian Ross stepped onto his front lawn, a wealthy grocer, meticulous, methodical, a man whose life revolved around order and routine. Beside him, his 4-year-old son Charlie ran freely across the grass, laughing, unaware that his small figure would soon disappear into history. Two men had been watching, silhouettes at the edge of the property, Mosher and Douglas calculating, waiting, biding their time, their eyes sharp, their intentions dark. The children's laughter carried across the yard, mingling with the distant clatter of horse hooves on cobblestone streets, a sound that would soon become memory. The moment Charlie was lured away, the city's pulse changed, a singular disappearance, a fate unknown. Neighbors would later describe the scene as ordinary, banal even. Yet for the Ross family, it was the beginning of an unspeakable nightmare. The police reports of the era-fragile pages preserved in the city archives recorded the abduction in meticulous detail. Officers noted the men's careful preparation, their luring of Charlie with fireworks, their knowledge of the yard, the timing of their approach. Letters followed 23 in total, each letter demanding $20,000. A staggering sum, especially in 1874. Misspellings rampant, evidence of desperation, of illiteracy, or perhaps cunning. Christian Ross, desperate to secure his son's return, negotiated. Heart-pounding. Days turned into nights, weeks into months. No exchange succeeded. The letters became instruments of terror. The boy remained unseen. Singular disappearance. Mysterious occurrence. The press across the nation followed the story. The Philadelphia Inquirer called it an unprecedented and horrifying abduction. And yet the truth was fragmentary, incomplete, unreliable, fragments of evidence scattered like pieces of shattered glass. Folklore began to seep in, whispered stories in the alleys. Children speaking of a shadowy man near the Ross estate, unseen eyes watching the front lawns, neighbors swearing they glimpsed a small figure moving through the mist, at night lights flickering in windows not their own. Some claimed to hear Charlie's laughter echoing in the streets, ghostly and haunting. The narrative of the abduction evolved from mere crime into legend, a spectral warning, a reminder that innocence could vanish in an instant, that shadows could conceal unspeakable acts. The family's ordeal stretched beyond the immediate. Christian Ross's negotiations were hampered by financial and social pressures. Letters sent to him instructed precise delivery methods. No one ever came to collect the money. Authorities attempted surveillance, staking out the exchange locations. Yet the perpetrators eluded capture. The investigation revealed connections between Mosher Douglas and other criminal elements operating along the East Coast. Their network small, cunning, predatory. The complexity of their operation hinted at planning beyond a simple crime of opportunity. The singular disappearance of Charlie Ross became a case study, a warning. The first nationally followed ransom kidnapping in the United States. And the public was riveted. Every archive, every police memo, every newspaper clipping hinted at both clarity and obfuscation, the narrative fragmented, some details clear, others obscured by time, by misreporting, by human error. Yet all pointed to one immutable fact: Charlie Ross had vanished, and the world had taken notice. The singular disappearance, the letters, the threats, the shadowed figures, all became intertwined, a story that would echo for decades, influencing law enforcement, shaping public perception, inspiring fear and fascination, and creating a motif that would recur from Philadelphia in 1874 to countless future cases, where innocence was preyed upon and shadows were never to be fully trusted. The summer stretched on. Philadelphia bathed in sunlight and shadow, but within the Ross household, time had become suspended, each day a mirror of anxiety and despair. Christian Ross paced the polished floors of his parlor, letters clutched in trembling hands, ink smudged from haste from sleepless nights, the demands unrelenting. $20,000. $20,000. The sum repeated like a haunting refrain in his mind. Officers arrived and departed, each with reports of sighting, speculation, or rumor. The boy's whereabouts remained singularly unknown, singular disappearance, fate suspended between life and death. Neighbors whispered, a man in dark clothing, a carriage moving silently through the streets at dusk. Sometimes a child's laughter echoed where no child had been. Shadows lengthened and merged. The city's imagination breathed life into these fragments. And in the homes surrounding the Ross estate, families lit lamps early, pulled children inside. Whispers of curses, of spirits, of unseen watchers. Folk remedies were whispered. Charms hung by windows. Prayers whispered in corners. The story of Charlie Ross moved from headlines into living myth, each retelling layering fear upon reality. Police records fragile with age speak of meticulous observation, statements recorded in spidery handwriting, officers detailing the movements of Mosher and Douglas prior to the abduction, accounts of their reconnaissance noting when the Ross children played in the yard, mapping entrances and exits. The letters continued, each more demanding than the last, the tone increasingly threatening. Spelling errors marking a human mind imperfect, dangerous. Christian Ross's anguish compounded, sleepless nights. A father's mind unraveling as hope and dread collided. The press fanned the flames, each day a new article, recounting the abduction, speculating on outcomes, interviewing neighbors and witnesses. The singular disappearance became a public obsession, the nation collectively holding its breath. And yet beyond the inked pages, beyond the formal reports, folklore thrived. Small children reported seeing Charlie near shadowed corners, distant voices repeating words only a child could speak. Neighbors reported fleeting glimpses, a pale figure moving between buildings, sometimes accompanied by the faint jingle of a carriage bell. Some believed the boy was not just missing, but trapped between worlds, caught between life and death, a spectral presence haunting the streets of Philadelphia. Parents whispered cautionary tales, a warning to keep children close, the story becoming legend even as it remained fact. Within the Ross household, tension reached a crescendo. Christian Ross enlisted the aid of family friends, men of influence determined to recover the boy. Each step measured cautious. The letters dictated the logistics, yet no meeting ever resulted in recovery. The shadow of the kidnappers loomed, constant surveillance attempted, unending nights of stakeouts, yet Mosher and Douglas remained ghosts. The city streets a labyrinth of potential clues, of danger unseen, the human element, the family, the officers, the neighbors woven into a tapestry of fear and hope. The psychological toll was immense. Christian Ross, sleepless pacing, consulting with detectives, calculating, revising strategies. The boy's mother, Mary Ross, tormented by visions of her child, imagining him in the hands of strangers, in darkness, crying, unseen. Her grief echoed across the household. Servants whispered of strange noises, the faint sound of a child's laughter, unexplained movements in empty rooms, shadows flickering, folklore merging with reality, creating a narrative where every sound, every shadow carried the weight of terror and possibility. The public became entwined. Newspapers published facsimiles of the letters. Readers traced the misspelled words, speculated on the kidnappers' motives. Moral panic intertwined with fascination. Citizens wrote letters to editors, offered advice, or blamed the Ross family. The city became a stage, the actors both living and spectral. Each gesture, each whispered rumor, each half-glimpsed shadow feeding the narrative. The singular disappearance became a mirror, reflecting both the tangible terror and the intangible fear. Amid all this, law enforcement evolved. The police force, inexperienced with ransom kidnappings, observed patterns, compiled notes, compared sightings, reached out to other jurisdictions. The seeds of a system, a network to combat such crimes. The human story intertwined with institutional growth, the tragedy of one child shaping the methods of many. Yet the boy remained missing. The letters, the shadows, the whispered tales, the fleeting glimpses all converged into a single motif, the unknowable, the tension between reality and myth. Every day a new chapter, Every night a deeper silence. Philadelphia held its collective breath, and history held its record. Of Charlie Ross, a boy stolen from a front lawn, whose absence created a nation's first glimpse into a world where innocence could vanish, and shadows could harbor unspeakable deeds. The summer months waned, Philadelphia's streets shimmering under the late July sun. Yet inside the Ross household, time had taken on a different quality. Elongated, distorted, measured not in hours but in letters received in footsteps heard in the dark and fleeting shadows passing under candlelight. Christian Ross remained vigilant. Each knock on the door, each unfamiliar footfall a potential harbinger. The boy's mother Mary sat by the parlor window, staring at the garden where Charlie had played. The laughter of other children only sharpened the void his absence left. The family's grief was palpable, heavy as the humid air, and yet intertwined with an unyielding hope, a desperate belief that the boy could still be returned. Police correspondence from the period reveals the meticulous detail of investigation. Detectives cross-referenced sightings, compiled reports from neighbors, street vendors, and even passing travelers. The letters themselves were scrutinized. Spelling errors, phrasing, punctuation, all clues. The demands of $20,000 repeated and insistent. The phrasing often hinted at the author's lack of sophistication. Yet combined with the precision of their actions, a chilling intelligence emerged. The abductors were methodical, deliberate, understanding of human behavior, patience, and cruelty. Every move calculated. The singular disappearance of Charlie Ross became a case study, not just of crime, but of the vulnerabilities of innocence, of the society that allowed shadows to operate unseen. Folklore began to intertwine with reality. The neighborhood children whispered of a carriage that appeared without sound, of figures glimpsed in alleys vanishing when approached. Servants swore they heard the soft patter of a child's feet in empty hallways. At night, lamps flickered inexplicably. A faint giggle sometimes carried on the wind. Some claimed to see a small figure standing at the edge of the garden, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. These stories, passed in whispers from neighbor to neighbor, created a spectral narrative, a mythos of fear, the abduction transforming into legend, the line between fact and imagination blurred. Within the household, the psychological weight was immense. Christian Ross deliberating on the letters, calculating a strategy, liaising with police, worried for every potential misstep. Mary Ross haunted by visions of her son, imagining him in the hands of strangers, in darkness, crying. The domestic staff tense, alert. Each creak of floorboards, each wind gust against the windows amplified. Human senses stretched. A heightened awareness bred from fear. A household suspended between hope and dread. Public attention was relentless. Newspapers published facsimiles of the ransom letters. Editorials speculating on the kidnappers' motives. Moral panic mixed with fascination. Letters to editors poured in, some sympathetic, some accusatory. The city became a theater of anxiety. Philadelphia collectively engaged in the story. Neighbors scanning streets, merchants watching alleyways. A city transformed by a singular act. The mundane daily routines replaced by hypervigilance. Citizens now actors in a drama that unfolded outside the bounds of ordinary life. Meanwhile, law enforcement adapted. The police force inexperienced with ransom kidnappings began to develop methods, tracking movements, surveillance strategies, documenting letters, interviewing potential witnesses. Procedural evolution born of necessity. The Ross family's ordeal contributed to the shaping of investigative practice. Every move they made, every step taken to locate Charlie, informing the future of crime detection. And yet the human story remained central. Grief, anxiety, hope, desperation. The family's emotional landscape interwoven with procedural innovation. Folklore continued to layer over fact. Reports of spectral sightings, shadows flitting past windows, the faint echo of a child's laughter in empty streets. Stories of Charlie appearing to those he knew, then vanishing. The narrative of the abduction transcended documentation. It became a cautionary tale, a parable of vulnerability, of innocence imperiled. Every retelling infused with dread. The city's imagination breathing life into the unknown, amplifying fear, shaping memory, creating a legend that would endure beyond the immediate tragedy. And then, on a cold December night, the confrontation. Holmes Van Brunt and companions faced Joseph Douglas. The gunfire. Mosher killed instantly. Douglas mortally wounded. Confession in the dying moments. The boy's fate, still unresolved. A chilling climax. Law, folklore, human emotion all converging in a single moment. The city shaken. History taking note. And the legend continuing to grow. Shadows long and persistent stretching across decades, whispering to those who would listen. A tale of loss, of hope, of the fragile boundary between reality and myth. December 13th, 1874. Brooklyn. A bitter winter night. The streets slick with frost. Lamps casting long, trembling shadows. Holmes Van Brunt and three companions gathered quietly. Tension thick in the air. Each breath visible. Each heartbeat audible. A confrontation set in motion months earlier. The culmination of fear of pursuit of unanswered questions. Joseph Douglas and William Mosher lay in wait, unaware that the hunters had come prepared, the night pregnant with anticipation. Gunfire erupted, a chaotic exchange. Mosher struck down instantly. Douglas wounded. The dying man confessed. Words slurred but chillingly clear. He and Mosher had been responsible for Charlie Ross's abduction. The city, the nation, now understood the gravity of the crime. Yet the boy remained missing. Singular disappearance. Fate unknown. The confession confirmed public suspicions, filled in some blanks, yet left others yawning, gaping, unanswered. Every statement, every detail, etched into the annals of history. Newspaper accounts from the era described the scene with both awe and horror. Reporters scribbled furiously, ink smudged by trembling hands. Letters arriving daily, rumors of conspirators, stories of shadowy figures in Philadelphia's streets. The public consumed every morsel of information. Some accounts romanticized the pursuit, others dwelled on the brutality, fact and folklore entwined. The narrative of Charlie Ross transcended simple documentation, becoming legend, cautionary tale, collective memory. Law enforcement dissected every shred of evidence. Correspondence between Douglas and Mosher, maps, notes, surveillance logs, the meticulous planning of the abduction, the careful selection of targets, the letters 23 in total analyzed for handwriting, phrasing, tone, each detail revealing a human mind, imperfect, calculating, dangerous. The singular disappearance became a blueprint for understanding the criminal mind, the first glimpse in the United States of ransom abduction methodology, and the human toll. Staggering. Inside the Ross household, grief intermingled with fragile hope, each update from authorities, each newspaper clipping, a surge of anticipation, a sharp pang of despair. The family's emotional landscape was raw, unfiltered, human. Servants whispering of lights moving at night, of shadows passing through the empty rooms. Folklore bleeding into fact, every sound, every movement scrutinized. The home itself a stage for fear, for longing, for the echo of absence. The nation watched. Philadelphia held its collective breath. Editorials debated morality, security, the rise of criminal sophistication. Letters from citizens offering advice, sympathy, condemnation. A society grappling with vulnerability, with the realization that innocence could vanish, that shadows could harbor unspeakable acts. The singular disappearance of Charlie Ross, now a symbol, an archetype, a motif to recur in history, from Philadelphia to Lindbergh, patterns repeating, echoes across decades. Folklore continued to grow, children speaking of small figures in the mist, neighbors glimpsing carriage lights at impossible hours, servants hearing laughter in empty corridors, the city's imagination transforming every fact into legend. The crime was no longer merely an abduction. It was a story that haunted the streets, that haunted the conscience, that lingered long after the newspapers had folded. And yet, the payoff remained elusive. The boy's fate never fully revealed. The confession, the confrontation, provided answers, but not closure. Shadows persisted. Questions remained. The narrative looped back on itself, intertwining law, folklore, human experience, creating a tapestry of tension, suspense, horror, fascination. The high point of the story, where the human, the spectral, and the factual converge. The climax not in resolution, but in confrontation, in revelation, in the chilling recognition that some mysteries endure. Charlie Ross, 4 years old, vanished from a summer lawn, letters demanding ransom, shadows in Philadelphia, a nation captivated, law enforcement adapting, folklore entwining with fact, and the human heart, beating against uncertainty, against fear, against grief. The singular disappearance that would echo through history, shaping future law, shaping public imagination, setting precedent, leaving questions, leaving ghosts. The winter deepened. Philadelphia cloaked in frost and fog, streets glinting with ice under gas lamps, the city exhaling mist with every breath. Yet inside homes a different air prevailed. Tension, fear, anticipation, shadows stretching long across parlor walls. The Ross household remained a theater of anxiety. Christian Ross pacing, letters held tightly, each word a hammer against the chest. Mary Ross staring from windows, eyes wide, searching, imagining, envisioning. The boy, small, frightened, in the hands of strangers. Or perhaps, somewhere beyond comprehension. Investigators pored over details. Police reports fragile, inked in spidery hand. Descriptions of Mosher and Douglas, their movements before the abduction. Witness statements, maps of the Ross property, the timing of play, the careful selection of opportunity. Letters dissected, phrasing errors, punctuation, each hinting at psychology, at motive. at capability. The evidence pointed, suggested, yet did not fully reveal. A gap between fact and understanding. Singular disappearance. Fate unknown. Witnesses came forward. Neighbors, children, servants, recounting fleeting impressions. Shadows moving where no figure should have been. Fleeting laughter. Doors opening and closing without touch. The mind of a city heightened. Each sound amplified. Folklore mingled with fact. Some swore to see Charlie, a small figure near alleyways. A ghostly outline, vanishing when approached. Each report recorded, catalogued, yet unverified. The city itself a participant. Each observer adding layers, building tension, the unknown tangible. Letters continued. 23 in total, demanding $20,000. Christian Ross attempting negotiation, the authorities advising caution. Stakeouts, surveillance, yet the kidnappers evaded capture. Shadows moving along streets. The line between reality and legend blurring. Every creak, every step, every flicker of candlelight. Pregnant with possibility, with dread. The human mind attempting to reconcile fact and fear. And then, December 13th, Brooklyn, confrontation, Holmes Van Brunt. 3 companions, Douglas mortally wounded, confession extracted in the dim lamplight. Mosher dead, the boy's fate, still unresolved. The evidence confirmed culpability, yet left void. An emptiness where resolution should have been. The nation captivated, public fascination heightened. Newspapers chronicling minute details, every word scrutinized, letters published, analyzed, the story becoming legend, fact and folklore inseparable. Folklore swirled, shadowy figures glimpsed on winter streets, children whispering of a boy wandering, faint laughter echoing down alleys, servants reporting fleeting movement in empty rooms. The narrative transformed into spectral warning, a cautionary tale, warnings whispered to children, the singular disappearance morphing into myth, each retelling layering fear atop fact, the human imagination bridging gaps, constructing meaning where reality offered none. The bridge across decades, patterns repeating, law enforcement learning, procedures forming, public awareness growing. Each kidnapping thereafter traced against Charlie Ross, template for caution, for detection, for policy. The human element central, grief, hope, anticipation, intersecting with shadows, folklore letters. The singular disappearance now emblematic, a motif. Echoed later in the Lindbergh case. A nation's fear crystallized, every detail analyzed, every rumor weighed, the boy's absence haunting, shaping memory, influencing policy, creating precedent. The climax did not reside in resolution. It resided in convergence. Human grief, procedural evolution, folklore shadows, colliding, creating a tension almost unbearable, the mind reaching, yearning for closure, for sight, for sound, for certainty. Yet only fragments remained. The letters, the confession, the empty streets, the whispers of shadows, the city itself a repository of unanswered questions, each layer deepening the mystery, each observer a participant in the unfolding narrative, cinematic, haunting, continuous, unrelenting. Charlie Ross, 4 years old, vanished. A singular disappearance, letters demanding ransom, shadows in the streets, confession in Brooklyn. The boy never returned. Yet the story endured, shaping public consciousness, influencing law enforcement, entering folklore, becoming legend, a cautionary tale for generations, a reminder that innocence can vanish, that shadows may conceal unspeakable acts, that the boundary between reality and myth is thin and sometimes impermeable. The city, the nation, history itself holding its breath and waiting, whispering for answers that may never come. Charlie Ross, 4 years old, vanished from a summer lawn, a singular disappearance, letters demanding ransom, shadows along the streets of Philadelphia, a nation captivated, police investigating, confessions extracted, yet answers incomplete. The boy never returned. The story persisted, growing, evolving, fact entwined with folklore, rumor feeding legend, each retelling layering dread upon reality. The streets where he once played, now silent, houses standing as witnesses, shadows stretching long, whispers of a child moving unseen, laughter echoing in the wind, stories of fleeting figures in alleys, servants recalling the brush of tiny footsteps on empty floors. A city haunted, a narrative bridging life and myth, the boundary between reality and imagination porous, fragile, almost imperceptible, and we are left with questions, questions that refuse closure. What truly happened to Charlie Ross? Where did the shadows lead? And how many other vanishings lay hidden unrecorded in the fabric of a nation? Each letter, each confession, each rumor, a fragment of truth, a mirror of fear, a motif repeated across decades, from Philadelphia in 1874 to kidnappings that would shock the world, the child lost, the public obsessed, law enforcement learning, society watching, the unknown forever imprinting itself on history. You've just witnessed one of the earliest cases of a child taken of innocence, stolen of shadows, intersecting with reality. Yet the story does not end here. The mystery continues, lingering in archives, in whispers, in imagination, and perhaps in the shadows around you tonight. What would you have done if it were your child, your neighbor, your street, and the letters arrived demanding a fortune? How far would fear drive action? And how much do shadows conceal? Charlie Ross vanished, yet his story echoes, warning, haunting, reminding us that some mysteries are eternal, and some disappearances are never closed. You just heard a file from history, one that never fully resolved. Follow us to uncover more forgotten stories, stories of vanished children, shadowed streets, and secrets that linger. And ask yourself, could some shadows still be watching, unseen, waiting?